I think we all have resilience if we have gone through and worked through overcoming obstacles, challenges, etc. That's where you build your resilience. Like, it's your ability to go through those things. There's a lot of doing for kids now where parents will fly in and sort stuff out, whether it's an argument at school or they're not doing well. But I feel that seems to be an observation that's made from some of my friends who are principals, where that's happening. So it's really affecting the children's ability to be able to handle a challenge or a confrontation or, just an argument with another child.
How do you get 10,000 people to take a step to the left? What's behind the relentless mindset of a world champion? Why do teams of exceptional talent fail? How do you manage the pressure to perform? These are just some of the curious questions we will attempt to answer as we bring you world leaders, curious minds, exceptional talent, successful CEOs, and incredible human beings who know how to inspire great leaders and are inspiring great leaders themselves. I am Craig Johns, high performance leadership expert, international speaker, and CEO of Speakers Institute Corporate and World Sport Coach. This is the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong. Welcome to the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast. Our guest today is a leadership and resilience expert, host of the Leading You podcast, and author of the newly released book, You Always Have a Choice. Before founding her leadership and coaching practice in 2007, she worked at National Australia Bank, or NAB for those in Australia, as Regional General Manager, State Business Manager, and State Sales Coach. As founder of Leaders and Lattes and Disruption Woman and Wine Network Groups, she has also studied leadership at Harvard Business School. In 2021, her life changed when she was diagnosed with stage 3 melanoma cancer. I have the privilege of introducing you to a remarkable human who successfully transformed underperforming and challenging businesses into top industry performers, is an animal lover, a leader of leaders, and someone who truly knows the power of choice. Julie Hyde. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for our chat today, Craig.
Yes, we're going to have fun here. I'm curious, you'll kick it off. Where did you grow up and what was the big dream when you were running around the playgrounds?
Yeah, and did a lot of running around the playgrounds back then. But my biggest dream, I always wanted to be a vet. So I had this dream of looking after animals and making a difference because they were my absolute true love. And of course, when I did my year 10 work experience, as you did then, I think that's still happening within the high school system, or I just came home every day crying. It was just, I didn't have the emotional fortitude to be able to be a vet, let alone get the marks. That was another challenge that was going to enter into that playing space. But I was just really devastated about how, seeing sick animals and seeing how people treat animals, and, you can't save every animal that comes in. So it was just not for me. So I lost my dream, you would say, at an early age. And that's pretty much how I ended up at the bank, because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Okay, fair enough. Look, we see that happen with people that go into, say, nursing, and where they're looking after people that may be unwell, people that go into nursing homes, very, very similar, where you're dealing with seeing things that may not always be happy, or maybe a little bit challenging sometimes as well. But so that's a lot of empathy. So you're someone who has a lot of empathy as well. So you're talking about emotional, but empathy as well for you?
Yeah, I think, well, particularly in the animal space, I think I have a different type of empathy for humans.
Yep.
It does differ. I just have this absolute full-on love and purpose driven in terms of, trying to make a difference for animals. And I do that in a different way now, of course, through donations. But I suppose it is from that empathy space and just really wanting to make a difference for them and just making them thrive and live happy lives and educating people that animals have feelings, all of them. And they're not just little playthings that you get for Christmas and then you can leave them tied up in the backyard.
No, that's right. That's right. They need a lot of attention and a
Yeah.
lot of care, just like human beings.
Mm.
Someone who works in leadership and works with a lot of leaders, there's been lots of talk over the last sort of, 5 to 10 years around, we must have more empathetic leaders. And I see that as sometimes a good thing, but I see it also sometimes as a real basement for people. It can really, really affect people because if you're someone very empathetic, then you're going to hold on to those emotions and it can affect your energy levels and it can sometimes sidetrack you from what else is going on. So do you feel that our leaders should maybe focus a bit more on compassion where there's empathy in there, but it's more of a shift to helping other people versus being, really empathetic leaders?
Yeah. And it's an interesting conversation around like being an empath as opposed to being empathetic, I think too. But I think it does sort of shift towards that compassionate because I believe to be a good leader, you do need to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand where they're coming from or be curious as to where they're coming from. So you might ask questions rather than just, hitting them between the eyes because they're not performing or their behavior is really bad or they're not showing up to work or whatever that might be. But it's leading from a heart space as well and understanding that the people that you are leading are not the process, the policy, the system. They're a human being and they have different motivations as opposed to the person that you spoke to yesterday. So I think that compassion comes into it when you are invested and your intent is to find out where this other person is coming from, what motivates them, what inspires them, how do they perform best.
Yeah, I think that's really good to put that out because I always kind of laugh at this, put yourself in other people's shoes. I mean, there's no way I can put myself in the CEO of a Fortune 100 company's shoes unless I've actually been there. I can't literally put myself in the shoes. I can have somewhat of a bit of an understanding of, okay, well, you're dealing with this. I might have a sense of what you're going through, but I'm never going to have a full understanding because each person's very unique. And, when it's a completely different space to what you've ever been in, how can you truly put yourself in those shoes? But I think, like being able to understand emotionally or energy wise, what might be at stake at certain times, we can kind of have an idea of what it is. And so when it comes to, whether it's understanding someone else, how far do we need to go? Do we need to spend lots of time really understanding these people, or do we just need to know a little bit to be able to, be there for that person and have what they need?
I think that really depends on the relationship that a leader has with their people. It depends on the situation. And some people are just not willing to divulge information to you. So they might want to, keep that very close to their chest. So the one thing that leaders can control is themselves. That is the one thing that they have control over. They can't control the other person. And it goes back to what I said before. If they have the intent to aim to have a conversation to understand what's going on, if the other person's willing to share, then I think that's what is within the control of the leader. And then, if something comes back at them that they don't like, they have the choice to then self-regulate and have a conversation about that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it's good. There's been a big shift in the last few years where we really want people to get to know more of the person. And, sometimes that can be a fine balance, right? Where we're dealing with some integrity issues in certain companies around, having parties and things like that where things go wrong and, when people might be under the influence of too much alcohol or they get too excited and things happen. But how far do we need to go from, separating out from the professional and into the personal? As leaders, how far should we really go to get to know someone and so they feel like they fit in, etc. versus, hey, it's maybe going too far. It's pushing the boundaries.
Gosh, that's such a big question, isn't it? Because it's just so dependent on the individual and what they're willing to share and what their beliefs are around that. Again, I think it does come back to the culture that is established within the workplace and the trust that is built with the team and the leader. So therefore, if the leader is a great role model and is role modeling what they're expecting, so if they're sharing something of themselves, then other people are more willing to share something of themselves as well. So for me, when I was a leader, I wanted to understand, the family dynamics of my team members. I wanted to understand what motivated them. Some people are motivated by the dollar, others are motivated by more responsibility. They like to lead bigger teams, whatever that looks like. And then I love to understand what pisses them off. Like, what is the thing that makes them really angry? And also, what are they really passionate about outside work? Like, what do they love? Like, are they an absolute animal at a football game? Or are they quieter and they like to go to the movies and or just sit there and read a book? Like, what floats their boat? So I think those dynamics are really dependent on the framework that the leader sets up in terms of the trust, the culture, and what they're willing to share of themselves and the integrity that they demonstrate to the team.
Yeah, and I can imagine you've worked with some smaller companies right through to some quite big companies as well.
Yeah.
And that dynamic changes. Let's say you're a CEO. If you're in a small company, say up to 200, 300, maybe even 500 people, you get to know most of the people in their organization pretty well. Like, obviously once you get over 200, 300, then it's starting to get a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
Versus when you're in a company that has 1 million staff around the world, a large multinational company, you don't get to know too many of your team. And like, how do you then become trustworthy? How do you then create the permission when you've got multiple layers in a bigger organization and you really only have a few touch points?
That can be a challenge. And working in a huge corporate, as NAB was, I think it comes back to delivering on your promises, do what you say you're going to do. So it's through behavior that I feel that the CEO can build trust and connection with the team. I think that was a big one for me because as I got up the ladder into senior leadership, and you're exposed to a whole lot more, and that is actually when I made my decision to leave, because what I heard promised to the greater team, the greater people who were out there facing the clients, having the conversations, saying one thing because that's what was said, but there was no intention to deliver that. And so there was a massive disconnection, and there was no congruence between what was said and what's being delivered. And I think that's where people just go, when that happens time and time again, because in large organizations, typically you're going to experience a lot of change. So the direction changed for us every 2 years as a minimum. So you're getting different messages, different, whether it's CEO or state manager or general manager, whatever that looks like. But if the words aren't matching the actions, then I think the people lose trust.
Yeah. And so, how can leaders ensure that obviously that, because there's one thing, look, as leaders, you've got to have that ability to change, and you do need to change direction based on what's happening in the environment sometimes. Sometimes they change for the sake of change, which you got to kind of consider why you're doing that.
Yeah.
But other times, there's a necessity for change. Otherwise, there is no business anymore. But how can we effectively ensure that our messaging has been able to transfer through the layers of leadership and management down to the people so that there isn't miscommunication? Because sometimes it's not that the leaders are doing anything wrong, it's just that the messages aren't getting through, and then the ones at the bottom start blaming the top when maybe those in the middle haven't actually transferred the information effectively.
Yeah. I think Gail Kelly, when she was leading Westpac, was a really good example of someone who made sure that happened when she established a change within the operations. She actually went out and visited all of the tiers within the organization to make sure that the message had landed. And she would then identify where the communication wasn't consistent with, what the vision is or what the framework might have been. So I think if you are basically getting feedback from the ground up, that's a really good indication as to where the communication might be not getting through effectively.
Yeah, no, it's important, right? Everyone's got to have that communication strategy. A lot of the time, we see companies who'll do a great communication strategy out to the media. Maybe they focus on that, but they don't really put the time and effort into making sure the communication strategy works well internally. And it starts there. You got to look after your people. You need to make sure everyone's aligned. It's such a critical part of successful businesses and leadership.
I agree. And I think also when you're going through, big change, I think, communicate more often. And even if you don't have something to communicate that. Like if nothing's changed, communicate that, because otherwise people will make things up in their head.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Now, you're working with a lot of leaders, and, what are you sensing is the big gap in leadership right now?
I think it depends on the organization that you're working with. So within the SME space, there seems to be a big need for the leaders to have their people back in the office, preferably 5 days a week. So they want people back in, and they sort of wanted things to return to normal because they found it quite challenging when people were off-site because the collaboration wasn't there. The learning wasn't there for the younger team members, like they weren't able to see what was happening in the workspace. So I think a lot of the leaders are wanting people back in and are facing resistance to that. People's priorities have changed. People's preferences have changed. They've seen how things can be. They've seen what they've missed out on in terms of family life and the time to commute into the office. And it's like, well, I don't want to be doing that all the time. So I'm going to be, I want more flexibility. And I think that's a big challenge for some people who are not necessarily wanting to look outside the square. So we'll lose good people because of that. So there's that aspect. I find that they're having a lot of trouble finding team members at the moment. It seems to have shifted again. It's an employee market as opposed to employer. So they're having a lot of trouble and getting people in to fill vacancies. But most of all, it's really managing their own energy, their own time, and I suppose that ability to lead by example when they feel like they're pulled in 150,000 directions in one day. Just they find it hard often, and leadership is hard and it is challenging.
I mean, leadership's always been hard. It's always been challenging. So why are we seeing more, is it just awareness that we are seeing more discussion around this, or is truly just that pace of change or the accelerated change that is happening or seems to be happening in the world? Is that what's leading to this? Or because we're talking about remote working, we're talking about people having different choices, but here we are, we're still having an issue around energy.
There's a huge issue around energy. And when you look at the rate of burnout, it's increased. The rates of mental illness is increased. That is very prevalent in the leadership community. And it's sometimes I feel like people are busy for busy's sake and feel the need to constantly be just constantly consumed, not focused on priorities. But at the same time, they're now leading 5 generations, sometimes 6 generations of people now who work very, very differently. And I just think it's a lot of pressure on the leader to perform. And sometimes, depending on who's at the top, they feel as though they need to be the ones to make the difference, to be the ones to make it all happen. Whereas if they sort of had different conversations and engaged their team more, use the collective intelligence around them, I think they'd find it a lot easier and empower more.
Okay, so what has led to this? Or why do you think it's led to this? Is it the fact that we decide to have no life outside of work anymore? Like, what's different? Because I've always seen people work hard. During COVID, we decided to reduce the length of meetings. That seemed to be pretty common around the world. There's a lot more talk about our mental health and well-being in recent years, and that we can speak up about it, and that is considered appropriate in society, and people accept it and encourage it. Why? What else is contributing to this? I'm interested because there's lots to talk about it, but why is it happening?
And I think that's a really good question. I also think it comes back to the individual. And, as you know, I've written a book about busy because it's become this prevalence within our society that if you're not busy, then what are you? If you don't say that you're busy, then what do you say you are? And when you ask someone how they are, it's generally, really busy, so busy, flat out. And then there can be a busy competition between people. And there's this sense of significance that people attach to their busyness. It's like the badge of honor that people wear. They're very, very proud of the fact that they're busy, but are they doing the things that are going to make the biggest difference to their outcomes? Are they doing the things that are going to make the biggest difference for their people, for the bottom line, for their clients? Yeah, what does that look like? They just seem to get caught up in this treadmill of doing the same thing. Then fires erupt everywhere and they end up firefighting for the day, and the well-written to-do list remains the same and added to at the end of every day. So it just becomes longer and longer. It just becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy when we're telling ourselves we're busy all the time, and that is exactly what happens.
Yeah, okay. See, it's interesting. I've observed a few things that I think are, we have full control of. Like, we all have choices, right? So I think, to me, burnout is a choice.
Yep.
And in most cases, see, I think there's a big difference here. There's a big difference between hardworking and that working, and a difference between hardworking and working hard when there are extra elements in there that may be unfair or maybe even a result of you, right? So look, I have flatlined 3 times in my life. When it comes to hard work, I have experienced the hardest work you can do, right? 132-hour working week. I went 70 to 80 hours a week for 302 days straight. I didn't burn out at that point. Never was burnout. My body shut down and it had enough, but it wasn't burnout. The only time I've experienced burnout was last year. And that was a result of sleep deprivation of having a young child.
Yeah.
And so for me, when a lot of people are talking about burnout, in the workplace, a lot of it keeps being thrown back on the work environment and I'm working extra hours. But in a lot of cases, to me, I feel it's that people are spending less time looking after themselves. So they get caught up in the Netflix craze of watching something and they just keep watching it and watching it and watching the addiction factor of social media. And so they're losing effective sleep. And to me, that is probably the major contributor to burnout. And I feel like it's overdiagnosed sometimes, but there is still a big issue with burnout. But most of the time, I reckon burnout could be prevented through better sleep patterns and by reducing that mental fatigue where when we're doing things like social media and we're watching Netflix series where the brain doesn't shut down. So people think it's recovery and rest time, but it's shut down. I'm curious to see whether there are other key things that are contributing to this because, we saw more bikes being purchased than any other time during COVID. So it's not as though people weren't still thinking about exercise. We've got more information about nutrition than we've ever had.
Yep.
But I feel like sleep is the one that is the killer. It's the silent killer.
Yep. Look, I'm not a burnout expert. That's not my thing. But my observations are it's because, going back to what you said, people do not prioritize self-care and looking after themselves. They don't prioritize eating well. They don't prioritize sleep, as you say. So many people compromise sleep because they're binging on the Netflix or they're working. They need to get something done. They feel as though they need to be doing all the time. And that's what is expected of them. But I think it's interesting in terms of when you hear stories of people who have burnt out, when they have the conversation with their organization or whatever that looks like for them, that they're going to leave, that they're going to change their life, generally the organization would say to them, we don't want you to leave. What do we need to do? How do we need to change? But if the person was responsible for themselves in having that conversation, they wouldn't reach that point. And yes, we all know this stuff. Like if you're an educated person, you know what to do for yourself. The fact is, we just don't do it. And I can be a little bit black and white in this space, but and I know it's extremely hard when you're working for an organization and you're wanting to climb the ladder and you feel like that is what is expected of you. But what people don't understand is if they do get rest, if they do eat well, if they do take the micro breaks and get fresh air, they will work so much more productively. Just because you work long hours doesn't mean you're productive.
All right. So many people know this and there's many people talking about this like you and I, right? We talk about it lots and we, for those that we have a close touch point, we can have a great impact. But we're still seeing so many people out there who, as you say, are really struggling through this, who continue to make the same mistakes and kind of get through life thinking, I'll be okay. I can eat this extra donut. I can I don't need to exercise tonight. You know what? If I sleep late tonight, I'll catch up on the weekend or whatever it may be. How can we actually change the needle? Because it doesn't seem to be changing much, even though we've had lots of education, we're lots of exposure to it. As you say, most educated people will know this stuff. Why aren't we shifting the needle?
I think, look, I would love for leaders to lead self-care. I would love for all leaders to make a decision that they are going to role model what, hopefully, ultimately, they would like their team to be doing in terms of looking after themselves. Whether that be that they're not working all hours all the time. Like, I understand that there are times that people need to work long hours, but it doesn't have to be the norm. It doesn't have to be, people seem to get in the habit and get on that hamster wheel of just doing that. So I would love for, where we have wellness programs and people come in to do a self-care talk, a lunch and learn or whatever that looks like, that it is actually implemented and led by the leaders. That's CEO, that's the senior leaders, that's the middle, and that's the business unit leaders, leaders of small business as well. People who are role models. And also I do feel that there can be a groundswell within the middle management where people do lead by example, because I am sick of hearing about the stories where, I got up to the top of the ladder, I burnt out along the way. I don't want to hear stories like that anymore, because sometimes I think, to get there, I've got to burn out. Like, burnout's normal. If you're going to get there, I need to really push the limits. But some people don't recover from burnout. It's like a lifelong thing. And it's not just burnout either. It's that fact that you are so consumed in the doing that you're not listening to the signals in your body. You don't believe you've got time to go to that health check, to do what you need to be doing for your health, because it's not a priority. So we miss out on recognizing what is happening in our body until we have that health episode, and then magically people can change their habits. Magically people can change when they burn out.
Yeah, we're reactive, right? We're very reactive to a lot of things in life. A lot of leaders are very reactive. Yes, they might set a strategic plan or they might set some goals, but a lot of the time they're just reacting to things that happen versus actually being very proactive and really being considered about what's happening. And I like to kind of look at from an athlete perspective. Most athletes can be a little bit different in team sports that are professional team sports because they play so much. But let's, in most athletes, they spend 95% of their time planning, preparing, training, and less than 5% of the time actually performing. Whereas when you look at the workplace, people spend 95% of their time performing, even more than that, and very little time preparing, planning, doing that proactive work that they need to do. So there needs to be a shift that way. You talked about change there. It requires a sense of urgency. And if we don't create a sense of urgency for our people to be proactive, then it's going to be a reactive sense of urgency.
Yeah.
So what can we do? And so, I know you talked about the leaders role modeling these behaviors, but how can we create that sense of urgency for those that might be a bit younger, that have a lot more energy reserves, that can get away with it, a few times, and then they hit 40 and then it's a lot harder to keep the weight off. It's a lot harder to get the recovery you need. Things change, right? So when we're younger, we're bulletproof. We're invincible. We can have those couple of late nights and still, we troop along and everything goes well. So how do we create that sense of urgency at maybe at a young age, or to get people to be proactive?
I believe it comes back to, a mindset, and to every person taking responsibility for their life, for their health. And there's a a practice I talk about in my book, which you'll be familiar with, which is the power of the pause. And it's just, pressing the pause button on your life and just reflecting on what is happening right now. Like, how am I feeling? How am I being as a leader? Because I believe that we're all leaders of self in the first instance. So how am I leading? How am I feeling? What are my energy levels like? Am I looking after myself? Like, really reflecting on how they are in effect. But it's taking that time out, that pause, to think about it rather than just keep going. Because we do change, we do evolve. Even with growth, like, we're evolving all the time, hopefully. And as you progress, you want to be doing new things. You don't want to keep doing the same thing because you're going to keep getting the same results. And as you get older, those results will probably decline if that's in the energy field, or your performance as an athlete. And I think there's so much that we can learn from the sporting environment that is not being transferred into business. And I don't understand why. Because everyone talks about, because I'm a Richmond supporter, the Tigers were so brilliant. Blah. It's because they got it right for the people in that team. But all athletes fuel, all athletes rest. They don't sprint the whole week after week after week.
It's interesting, when a lot of companies look for speakers, for instance, they're always looking that they love the people that can talk about sport, right? So we have all these sport things and they talk about all the great things from sport, but it very rarely transfers into the business field, even though they love having them come back. It is a big, it is a simple way of looking at things, to actually be more effective and look after our body. And we make choices. I know your latest book, we're talking a lot about choice in here. You always have a choice.
Yeah.
But why do people not consider they have a choice, and why do they discontinue doing what they're doing? It's this mindset shift. Does it need to shift it at schools so that we can bring there, to really help those people when they come into the workplace? Do we need to see shifts there as well as, the leaders really making the time to do the power of a pause on a regular basis?
That's a tough one, because I think the schools do, well, I'm not exactly sure, but I think schools do have some good education programs around, the health and the fitness, etc. I think, again, it's people taking responsibility for their own life. And, there's that thing where you, if you see it, you can believe it. So if you see it happening, you can believe that you can do it. And I've seen so many people just getting caught up in that wave of the culture, whatever that looks like. You work really, really hard, and then you might play hard on a Friday night, and then you come back and you repeat it all again during the week. And they work extremely long hours. They're exhausted until they get to a point where they go, I don't want to do this anymore.
Mm.
There's that accountability to yourself. And it all starts, I think, it's not just at schools, it starts in the home. What are we doing as parents that we're role modeling to our kids? Because I ran a workshop once, and one of the women came up to me and said that her daughter, who was 8 years old, had come up to her and said that she was sick of being a technology orphan, because when her mum got home from work, she would sit there on the phone, whether that be emails, whatever she was doing. I didn't ask. So that's what her daughter is seeing. That's what that is being role modeled in the home. So I think it's really important that parents have that conversation with children if we're starting there. And organizations just take it really seriously. But we as individuals cannot rely on everyone else doing everything for us as we get to, an adult age. There needs to be some accountability and responsibility for you to lead yourself through your life in the way that works for you. Because some need more sleep. Some need to take breaks, whatever that looks like. Make it a priority. And until we do that, nothing's going to change.
Yeah. So you talk about people taking responsibility and accountability, but do we just all need a coach? Do we need someone there to help us along the way? Is maybe that the reason we, on our own, we struggle to deal with it, so we fall back into our comfort zone and do what is easy.
Yeah. And making decisions to support your health is often saying no to things that are fun or, going out every night of the week, whatever that looks like. But it's often saying no to things that you might want to do because health is your priority. But to your point, is to having a coach. My God, it'd be awesome if everyone had a coach from a young age. Because obviously when you go into sports, because I've always played sport when I was, when I was young, going through school and out of school, always had a coach who would help you perform. But then you get into work and you don't get a coach until you're at executive level, or even if you get there. So you don't necessarily have that external perspective of someone looking from the outside going, hey, I'm observing this. I'm noticing you're not looking after yourself. So maybe let's put something in place and I can keep you accountable to that. That would be so good if everyone could have a coach.
It's not that difficult for organizations to set up a mentoring or a coach buddy type situation where everyone, you can have it internally, right? And then obviously at a certain point, you may need someone externally just because of the conversations that may need to be had, may get into a little bit more confidential type information, etc. Or you just may need that external person. But it's not that difficult to set up a mentoring system where you only need to touch in once every 2 weeks. It might only be for 15 minutes. It doesn't take much. I think sometimes we look at some of these things and go, oh, it's too big a problem. Oh, it's going to be too hard to do. But in fact, it doesn't actually require much time to actually get a really good outcome. There will be people that may need extra help and time, and then you provide that for them, or you help them to find that person for themselves. But there's no reason why we can't build this. But I don't see too many organizations doing it. I'm seeing some, which is great, and I love it, but we're not seeing too many do it yet. And there's such an easy opportunity out there, and it doesn't cost you anything.
No, and I've seen people organizations do that too, but it's not focused on the individual so much. It's focused on career. How can they get to the next step? So if it's more rounded in terms of the focus, that would be brilliant and easily done. Like you say, a buddy keeping you accountable to leaving early one night, or, making sure you get to your sport one night, or running, or whatever that looks like for you.
I like that. So we're talking about, you do a lot of work around trying to get leaders to be more effective at self-leading first. So leading the self first. What does that look like? What sort of components? We talked about, obviously, the energy management. We've talked about, a bit of sleep, etc. But what are the key components that people really need to just have at least have an awareness on, and if not, a plan that can get them through, and so that they're in a great frame of mind and physical condition to be able to lead well from an energy management point of view for both themselves and other people?
I think you said the word, it's very much around self-awareness. So it's really improving their effectiveness of how they're leading and also who they are as a leader. Because often when leaders get really busy, they lose connection to who they are, what they stand for. So it's very much about understanding that and really connecting back to their values as well. So it's really anchoring themselves in that. And you find that when they're going through challenge or, particularly with people, they can really anchor themselves into who they are, what they stand for. And they can channel that as resilience. But it is understanding, how do they be effective as a leader? What do they need to do to look after themselves? And I do talk about that in the book. And what are your priorities? How many balls are you juggling in the air? And labeling those. And should you be juggling all of those all at once? Like, what can you let bounce and what can you just drop and leave for good? That's a really simple exercise that people just sort of go, oh my God, like such a simple thing. But I didn't realize I was doing all of this and trying to do it all at once. But it's also, and you will have heard of the, leading above the line and below the line, and understanding where you are at any given time. And, having the curiosity to understand how you're feeling, how you're leading, and moving yourself above the line more than you're staying below the line. And also the mindset that you need to be leading through whatever you're leading through, because you need to adopt a different mindset depending on situation.
If you're a parent and one of those priorities is your children, please don't drop them when you're juggling them.
They would remain a crystal ball.
Okay, so that's great. I think that's important, being able to prioritize, being able to understand what are the non-negotiables, and putting some barriers in place. I think barriers are kind of a big thing too. We prioritize things, but then we don't put boundaries around certain things as well. And I think one of the biggest things that can shape a lot of people's effectiveness as a human being and as a leader is, a digital detox sort of thing. The boundaries around when you have digital devices happening, whether it's the phone, whether it's the TV, whether it's the computers, and how you separate those. And it gets really challenging when you are working from home, if you own your own business and things like that, where you might, certain businesses might be a bit more fluid. It's not your general 9-to-5 job type thing. That can get a little bit more challenging. And I think people are still trying to figure that one out too, with regards to this hybrid working world where the people are working from home remotely and they love having their children around and love being able to do more things with it, but it does add more challenges to it because yes, you spend more time with your children, you've still got to fit your work in.
Yeah, that's right. But again, it's working out what is suitable for you. Like some people will get up early and then deal with the kid stuff and then do work when they're at school or at, playgroup or whatever that looks like, and then come back and do more. So you might not be able to work in, blocks of hours, or a full day, I should say, but you can work in blocks of hours that'll work for you.
Yeah, it does make it challenging though, because it's harder. It's still, even though you're doing that, it's still hard to switch off because
I can imagine.
Yeah, you've got to have that ability to switch off when you go to a play group and all day. Like I've just done today, I worked for 3 hours first, and then actually I went and swam and did yoga first. So I got my exercise and freeing my mind early in the day, ate well for breakfast, and then sat into a couple of hours work before going off to play group. And, that transition between sitting at a desk where I am right now to walking through that door and going 5 paces to pick up my daughter and walk her up the road to playgroup for an hour and then transition to our au pair and then walk back. Yes, there is transition moments, but you've still got to free that mind from what you've just been thinking about and to be able to just let it relax and switch. And it's the biggest challenge, right? When anyone being a parent, it is a very big challenge to manage all things in life, and, as including sleep, and even if you try to go to bed at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, it doesn't mean you're going to get 9 hours sleep.
Exactly. But hopefully that's not every night for you now.
No, it's not every night. It's not every night. It's good. Resilience has been a word that has become quite common in people's vernacular over the last few years. I really struggled when this first come out. I'm like, we're talking about resilience. Why do people need to be more resilient? They're already quite resilient. They just don't know it. And so I'm like, how do you actually create resilience training? Why do we need this when people actually deal with stuff all the time and manage to get themselves through it? When it comes to resilience in the workplace or with leadership, what do we really need to focus on? Because we have the skills. In most cases, we have the skills to deal with it. We're just not applying them.
Yes. This is this is like a big challenge. I don't know if you've heard the same thing for leaders who are leading, younger generations, that they feel like there's a lack of resilience, that they're not able to cope with various, whether it be change or what they see as a reasonable level of stress. I think it can be really challenging. So yes, I totally agree with you. I think we all have resilience if we have gone through and worked through overcoming obstacles, challenges, etc. That's where you build your resilience. Like, it's your ability to go through those things. There's a lot of doing for kids now, where parents will fly in and sort stuff out, whether it's an argument at school or they're not doing well. But I feel that seems to be an observation that's made from some of my friends who are principals, where that's happening. So it's really affecting the children's ability to be able to handle a challenge or a confrontation, or just an argument with another child. I'm not blaming that for what's happening in the workplace, but I think you have got your own resilience that you can dig deep into if you choose to. It's there. You've got through something before and you'll get through it again. The sun will always come up. The sun will always set. There are so many tools available, free tools. You don't even have to go through resilience training to get yourself through something. There's lots of helplines. There's lots of help out there for people to get through something, but also know that they've got through that challenge and they can do it again. It takes courage sometimes.
Yeah, and these are skills. We talk about critical thinking, decision making, being able to manage the challenges in crisis. And I think sometimes we continue to take that away more. Yes, it may not be happening as much. We help people out, young kids out too much, or we pamper them, or even at school, and for all different reasons why they may not have that space to figure it out for themselves as much. But we're also doing it at the workplace. The more we have technology, the more it's taking away decision making, the more it's taking away. And we need more critical thinking as the more technology comes in. But however, we seem to be lacking it, even though they're trying to build it at schools in more of a curriculum sense. It's like, let's look at the environment sense, and it's given the opportunity. I mean, you can see over to this side, I've got a Chesterfield chair here, and my daughter the last couple of days, she loves it that I can sit her on there, and she sits back and thinks she's the queen. It's really funny to watch. And this morning, she was trying to figure out how to come off it because it was just a little bit higher or a little bit different to us. And she got partway down and was about 2 inches from her foot being on the ground. And she was just holding on to the thing and then trying to figure out and then start getting close to crying. And my wife and I just sat there and said, no, we're not going to help her. She'll figure it out. And so I think we've got to, it's the same in the workforce. When we can see that we know the answer, or we know how to figure it out, we don't always need to help that person through it. We've got to let them figure it out for themselves, and we've got to give them that time and space. And I think that in this whole, race for greater productivity and greater efficiency, we're not giving people enough time to be able to make mistakes, or that that time to actually make decisions and think about solutions to overcome something. We're too quick to rush in, or we're too quick to go to the phone and ask Dr. Google how to figure it out. And so we've got to create those space in the organizations so that people can build that. We don't need specific resilience programs. We just need to give them more space to play in a way, to figure stuff out, like to be a human.
Yes. And I totally agree. We need to give them space to think, to just think about what they're doing rather than just rushing in and reacting and doing, reacting to a direction. It's like, oh yeah, I'll go and do that. Whereas let's think about it for a minute. Like you say, like the planning aspect, is often not there, even for small task projects. It's just rush in and do. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. I think we've got some way to go to figure this out. And I think it's a great opportunity for people, and even coaches actually, like I'm a coach and you're a coach. And sometimes, our role as coaches is to ask questions a lot, to allow them to come to realization. But sometimes I feel like we actually just need to sit in silence and not even ask them the question, because we can really control the narrative if we ask the question. Yeah. And so let's just not ask the question sometimes. Let's just let them struggle a little bit and figure it out. And that's a fine balance of knowing when to just sit back as a coach and go, you know what?
Not saying anything.
I don't need to say anything here. I'm going to let you figure that out. I want you to come back in 1 week. That's our session done. You've told me something. Yeah. All right, we're done. That's 1 minute gone. Thank you. I'll charge you for the hour, but spend a week and come back to me. You'll figure it out.
Yeah. Love it.
Beautiful. The new book, what did you learn about yourself writing the new book? I mean, obviously you went through a really challenging moment in your life a couple of years ago where you were diagnosed with cancer, and it sounds like you're doing wonderful to overcome that. Actually, but also, what has that taught you to then write the book, and then what did you learn about writing the book? So it's a bit of a big question, but
yeah. So the book is based on my story and what I learnt through going through that challenge. So the stage 3 melanoma, it was a total shock. It was during COVID here in Victoria. We were locked down.
Oh.
Not an ideal situation. And I'd always been, fit and healthy. And all of a sudden you're in hospital. It was on my foot as a starting point. So I couldn't walk for a couple of months. I couldn't get out of bed there for a while. And I learned a lot about myself in that I thought I had let go of being a control freak to a point. But I definitely had not. I love being in control, and that's what challenged me the most, because I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I had no experience in the medical world, and I felt really, I can't say this word very well, really vulnerable, and I didn't like it. So what I found was I was going down into dark places because I'd been misdiagnosed twice, which led to it spreading, and I was really angry about that. My mindset was not good. I was not liking myself, and I think if you looked in the mirror, I had like this black cloud all around me as my energy, and I just got sick of myself at one stage, and I thought, you've got a choice here. You can lead yourself through this, or you can be a victim. And that's a word that I hate and often will motivate me away from and towards something else. So, and that was my starting point. And then I thought, my God, I've got all of these tools and techniques that I use for everyone else. And now you need to apply this for yourself. And to understand that you have been through many, many challenges throughout your life. You are going to get through this. But I think the biggest thing that I learnt for myself is that how much I had to advocate for myself through this process. and how much I had to give myself hope, because the medical world will not do that for you. All I wanted to hear were the words, "You will be okay." And no one would say that to me, and still has not to this day. So you've really got to dig into your resilience, connect to your values. That's where I really had to basically revamp that again and really connect to who I was and who I was going to be in terms of leading myself through this challenge. So big learnings in terms of using your voice and how much you need to lead through this type of situation where you think others would lead you through it. The experts. But no, that doesn't happen.
Wow. It's a very challenging moments from a mindset perspective. And, even though you may already have the tools, it's still a challenge, right? Life is not simple. We can have all the education, we can have all the tools, we can have the experience, and it still will throw us spanners, the spanner in the works that challenge us, to try and overcome something. And so it's, we've got to constantly be working on it. We've got to constantly be proactive to try and put ourselves in the best position, but then know things are still going to go beyond what we have done before, and we're going to need to try and dig deep into those toolboxes to bring us back. But you're a fighter, and I love it. I love it. You're a fighter, and you've made that choice, which is really, really important. We all know smart people have great answers, but the most successful people ask great questions. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
Oh my goodness, for the first time. Now you put me on the spot. Oh, yes. So for the first time, I did, we're up in North Queensland, and I'm not a massive fan of heights. And we did zip lining. And that was really awesome. I loved it. My heart was beating at a gazillion miles an hour as we were walking up to get on the first thing. But yeah, that's something I did for the first time. And it's like, yeah, I want to do that again.
Isn't it amazing, those things we fear the most, and then we get up, then we do, and we go, and it becomes addictive, right? It's like, let's go.
Yeah.
I want to do it again. Give me again.
Like, oh, that adrenaline, that was awesome. I want to do it.
What is the one question that you would love to solve?
What is the one question I would love to solve? Probably going back to that burnout conversation that we have. Like, why do people let themselves get to that point? That is a question that I would love to understand. I'm not sure if I can understand it, but
It's a good question. Very good question. For you, what is an inspiring great leader, and who is a great example of this for you?
an old, this is not a well-known figure, but a boss that I had in NAB was a amazing leader and a great role model for me. What he was he was decisive, he was empathetic, he was compassionate, and he was a really good communicator. And what he did was he truly believed in his people and empowered them. To me, that is someone I emulated myself on, because he just had it. And he wouldn't say that he did. He was really, really humble. But he was such a great role model for me. And I think now, we talk about human and empathetic, and but I think that's who made the biggest difference for me in my working career.
Beautiful. You've shared lots of great insights today. How can people learn more about what you do, and what is the best way for people to connect with you?
I'm a prolific sharer on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's a great space to understand what I do, and also my website, juliehyde.com.au.
Yeah, excellent. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today to get a real insight into, your first passion around animals and wanting to be a vet, and how you realized something about yourself that made a bit of a challenge, right? The empathetic, emotional response to animals took away kind of the beautiful connection you had with them, the passion in a way. And so to make a decision to move away from that was very brave and bold at that time. To then find yourself in the corporate world where you've navigated the corporate ladder, so to speak, to now then really being able to influence and support those in being able to lead more effectively through leading themselves first. I love what you stand for. You're very raw. You've got great answers to questions, which I really, really enjoy listening to. And I like your approach around that. We've got to make this difference. We've got to figure out how to make this change, create this sense of urgency so people can look after themselves more effectively. We can reduce that burnout rate and then be great role models and leaders for the people that we look after, not only in our corporate lives, but maybe in our families and other community aspects as well. So thank you for all the work that you do. Really, really appreciate it. Love this conversation. Can't wait to continue it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. It's been awesome.
It's time for you to join the Inspiring Great Leaders movement by visiting craigjohns.com.au. Share this podcast on LinkedIn and be sure to hashtag Inspiring Great Leaders. We would love it if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Drop us a line with your feedback and questions and connect with us on the Craig Johns LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram pages. Be sure to check out the next Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong.